The referees were enraged at Stephanie White. She had to be restrained by Caitlin Clark. Even on the sidelines, keeping Steph White in check was Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark must restrain Stephanie White, as you can see. Who had that on their daily bingo card? Back-to-back technical fouls and 2 turnovers? Oh my God, what are we doing? White, Stephanie. And I witnessed folks going completely crazy, gifting her appreciation for receiving a technical foul. It's not a favorable situation for the Fever overall, and I don't believe we're good enough. Stephanie White entered the playoffs 2 minutes ago with absolutely no strategy. Now Caitlin Clark is demanding answers because her frustration has reached a breaking point. White, Stephanie. You would assume that you would arrive in Atlanta with a strategy after taking a few days off and knowing that your opponent will be the Atlanta Dream for the next 3 days. Caitlin Clark had to restrain Stephanie White when she lost all self-control in front of the officials. White's incapacity to manage the game was revealed in that dramatic moment, which captured the roiling annoyance on the sidelines. I'm not sure. They simply can't get away with these fucking refs these days. Man, I just have to be honest. This game has been really, really awful. Stephanie White threw a fit at the officials. We just have to get into this, man, and Caitlin Clark had to hold her back. Caitlin Clark had to intervene and restrain her own coach even on the sidelines. In a pivotal playoff moment, Clark's actions demonstrated how out of control the coaching had become when Stephanie White was given a technical foul. Even on the sidelines, Caitlin Clark was there, keeping Steph White in check. Steph gets the tea here, as you can see. Boston Mitchell has some things to say. She is escorted to the sideline by Caitlin. Additionally, Caitlin is typically thought of as the one who is crashing out. In this instance, Coach Stephanie White was unhappy about a lot of things, I'm sure, but one of them was the ongoing foul calls versus Boston Aaliyah. It was a startling scene. Stephanie White, Caitlin Clark's head coach, is being violently restrained. For a lot of supporters, this was the most convincing proof yet that White's terrible coaching was losing control under duress. The WNBA referees are utter garbage. Caitlin Clark had to restrain Stephanie White because this was so garbage. Who had that on their daily bingo card? Whose bingo card contained that? The WNBA officials did a horrible job officiating this game. You are nothing more than a joke, Kathy Engelbert. Indiana handed up 2 consecutive technical fouls and 2 turnovers at the beginning of the 4th quarter. The team's momentum was ruined by White's meltdown at the worst possible moment, and the players were clearly frustrated. Tell me why the 4th quarter begins. Back-to-back technical fouls and 2 turnovers? Oh my God, what are we doing? What are we doing? As an example, I can see what Stephanie White wants. Sometimes the coach wants to ignite their team and allow the, "you must be on some bullshit, don't you?" When Stephanie White committed a technical infraction, some spectators attempted to applaud her, but the truth was otherwise. Her outburst revealed her lack of control on the sidelines and simply served to increase the turmoil, rather than inspire a comeback. Stephanie White and I witnessed folks going completely crazy when they gave her credit for her technical foul. All right. You know, I'm too little, too late. They were behind by 10 points with 8 minutes remaining in the contest. In this game, there were issues with the refereeing. Definitely on all sides. I witnessed folks in great distress. Overall, the Fever's performance was deemed unsatisfactory, indicating that they were just not good enough. Calls for accountability became louder as a result of the court debacle and White's bad leadership. It wasn't a terrific situation for the Fever overall, and we lost that game in the 2nd and 4th innings. And we simply aren't good enough, in my opinion. I don't believe our firepower is sufficient. We don't have adequate defense, in my opinion. We're not large enough, in my opinion. I don't believe we are strong enough. We don't have enough gunfire, in my opinion. To get this back to Atlanta, we'll need a lucky victory. At home, we must win a fluke game. Furthermore, I'm not even sure if a home game of chance will be sufficient. Stephanie White had no strategy when she arrived at the playoffs. The team's offensive disarray and terrible lack of preparation were key factors in their downfall. In Indiana, everyone else appeared to down their game. White, Stephanie. You would assume that you would arrive in Atlanta with a strategy after taking a few days off and knowing that your opponent will be the Atlanta Dream for the next 3 days. Caitlin Clark herself had to calm Stephanie White down when she lost control during the intense game. When the squad most needed direction, that moment revealed how the top leadership was failing. Take a look at this if you weren't there during the game. As if Stephanie White is losing her mind over the referees. Caitlin Clark must calm him down. Caitlin Clark needs to calm her down. Her tenseness is evident from the fact that ESPN won't even air her. Fever coach receives technique fantastic, that's all. Don't even explain. For this reason, Jay Petty is under the hoop and Naz Hillman simply throws her out. Foul calls, according to White, ruined the Fever's rhythm and prevented any offensive momentum. She demonstrated her incapacity to manage stressful situations by pointing at referees rather than making adjustments. Fouls. I believe that we get going, and then they get some opportunities and, 4 or 5 consecutive foul calls. I believe that it halted the game's progression. We were unable to go up and down throughout the transition. It has occasionally caused us to lose our rhythm, The ball didn't move as much, I guess. But, the games are in right now, especially at this time of year, but it's usually the margins. 18 points for second chances. The coach admitted that foul play was the game's deciding factor, momentum, and kept the club from entering a transitional state. This demonstrated her inability to come up with solutions when facing up against real opponents. They are capable of outscoring us from the three-point line, And since they're a really skilled three-point shooting team, they're going to get some. They're the ones where we're losing our guy or overhelping. We're rotating where we shouldn't be, huh? We're not shut down. We don't use forceful switches, You all of those things, Well, they're long and quick. They force you to labor for the duration of your belongings. We either gave up offensive rebounds at the end of the clock or played excellent defense. Therefore, there are several small things. I like our current location. The fact that our gang is still fighting makes me proud. And we're going to be better on Tuesday. Stephanie White came under fire from critics for spending the majority of the game with Aaliyah Boston near the three-point line. Her unwillingness to change strategies revealed her terrible postseason coaching choices. Will you talk about how Aaliyah Boston spends 90% of the goddamn game standing at the three-point line? Will you utter those words? Will you take responsibility for your errors in this? Because you didn't perform well. Stephanie White, you didn't do exceptionally well. You didn't change anything. You didn't. Aaliyah Boston remained at the three-point line, performing handoffs and serving as a hub throughout the night. The Indiana Fever, analysts emphasized, were just not ready. When it counted most, White's lack of strategy and adaptations left the players bewildered and ineffectual. Play with the same official on the court. However, the officials are not always to blame for the Indiana Fever's defeats. While some of these losses are the coach's responsibility, others are the players. This is what I'm saying to let you know that Indiana must be a premier organization and America's team. It can't be about losing to someone else every time. According to observers Stephanie White's, the Fever's chances were being ruined by obstinacy and bad choices. Observing this catastrophe further strengthened Caitlin Clark's demands for leadership accountability. Energy that was, quicker to the ball at the end of the transition. The game's momentum started to shift in the opposite direction, as raced off to a slight lead, and then awful balls starting rolling in with reviews that Stephanie White had to fire her challenges on. Despite her potential effect, Stephanie White only gave KK Timpson 2 minutes because she refused to play. Fans were incensed by this choice, demonstrating once more how the terrible loss was caused by White's subpar rotations. KK need to have performed more. I also mentioned that I predicted that Michaela Timms and outraged KK will play a key role in this match. And why, man, doesn't Stephanie White play her in? This game, he ought to have played more. We need to have seen more of this game, dude. I gave it a call. That's what I said. She shouldn't have played just 2 minutes in this Gortifa game for any reason. White continued to have faith. Despite her struggles with fouls and turnovers, Natasha Howard played a lot of minutes. The coach's continuous reliance on a player who was obviously damaging the team's chances prompted fans to demand explanations. Not versus Natasha Howard, because Natasha Howard's track. Natasha Howard was subjugated by Nas Hillman. What about that? Dominated her. 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks, and 16 points. Natasha Howard was completely overpowered. You are the one, Stephanie White. Completely overpowered. You are the one, Stephanie White. Who said experience couldn't be replaced? Describe Natasha Howard. How is this lady getting 24, 25, 30 minutes a game? How? Even if we get harmed, I don't care. Act as someone else. White's technical foul occurred just when the Fever was trying to cut the lead in the fourth quarter. It revealed her lack of self-control under duress and gave the opposition free points rather than inspiring her troops. You're attempting to rejoin the game, though, dude. They were probably out for a run when she did it. The Dream were running. They were probably behind 10 points. It's the worst moment to hire a technician. Oh, guy, hurry up! Then the Fever simply regained the initiative to attempt to close the gap, correct? White was unable to force Natasha Howard and Aaliyah Boston into more assertive positions, despite Caitlin Clark's unavailability. Both players made far too few attempts, which cast doubt on White's offensive strategy. Let me make a point. Alia Boston and Natasha Howard taking 7 shots, making 9 shots. Without Caitlin Clark, what justification do you have for that? Both of those players ought to have made at least 12 to 15 attempts. And occasionally, I believe Stephanie White loses sight of the goal of acquiring some of these new players. White lost her cool by receiving a technical foul late in the game after wasting early challenges. When the pressure was at its peak, these coaching errors left the Fever without essential resources. That's one thing. Stephanie White, who had to use challenges early in the game, became frustrated after some phantom foul calls. Late in the game, she became tense. She will undoubtedly have something to say to the officials. White didn't adapt even when there were possibilities. Her flaws as head coach were further exposed as the Fever appeared unprepared due to her inability to come up with any effective ways to counter Atlanta's coaching. It's a problem that we were unable to challenge anything later in the game because we had to expend 2 early challenges. There were numerous instances where I felt that we had our opportunities. We had our opportunities in the game, and I doubt that we will play. I also doubt that the dream will be as awful once more. Even though the dream was awful, we allowed ourselves to lose by almost 20 points in each quarter. The players were utterly disoriented on the court, unsure of their positions or roles. Stephanie White's lack of organization was the direct cause of this uncertainty, demonstrating how terrible her coaching had gotten. Shots weren't coming in unless she was Kelsey Mitchell. The players are partly to blame for that. The lack of a strategy is one aspect of that. In the absence of a game plan, players are unable to establish rhythm. They won't know what the coach truly expects of them if they don't know what to anticipate from each player's performance. Players are unable to understand their function. That, too, seems to be a contributing factor. Some of these players simply aren't aware of their responsibilities. Caitlin Clark had to calm White down when he lost it and threw a fit at the referees. The coach's frustration erupted instead of being directed towards solutions, revealing her incapacity to lead under duress. Like, they can't possibly hang out with this team when the officials are also against them. They simply cannot. They are inadequate. They are completely capable of hanging with this team. With the referees not on their side, they are not good enough to hang together with this team. Take a look at this if you weren't there during the game. Caitlin Clark had to calm Stephanie White down since she is losing her mind about the referees. Caitlin Clark had to calm him down after she became agitated. White acknowledged that numerous foul calls interrupted the game's flow and disrupted their transition offense. But a coach who refused to accept responsibility was exposed by blaming referees rather than changing tactics. It's really annoying. Quite annoying. Even when they succeed, nobody enjoys using their difficulties in the first half. See, it's what it is, and you know that. There is nothing new about this. On the one hand, I believe we should exploit it to our advantage. And on the other, we should attempt to be disciplined enough to avoid it. It is, in fact, an equal chess battle. White's sideline outburst demonstrated how easily she lost control, even after utilizing both challenges early. Instead of soothing her team, her disorganized style left players exposed and uneasy at crucial situations. Yes, just discussing the fouls. You clearly used both of your challenges in the first half, and those technical fouls in the fourth proved to be the tipping point for tensions. How annoying was that today exactly? It's really annoying. Quite annoying. Even when they succeed, nobody enjoys using their difficulties in the first half. See, it's what it is. And you know that? There is nothing new about this. White never acknowledged her own errors, but she persisted in blaming her players and criticizing fouls and rotations. This mindset exposed why her leadership is in doubt regarding the offensive possession and left the Fever without accountability. Come on, Steph, put an end to it. Put an end to it. The referees are jerks, yes. We are aware of that. Yes, they made some poor decisions, but you made a mistake. Outscores from the three-point line are something you've been fumbling with. And since they're a really skilled three-point shooting team, they're going to get some. They're the ones where we're losing our guy or overhelping. We're rotating where we shouldn't be, huh? We're not shut down. As you may imagine, we don't use forceful switches or anything like that. Simply pointing the finger at the players. Literally pointing the finger at the players. Stephanie White's rotations and actions on the sideline were criticized by observers for lacking any true reasoning. Players' frustration simply served to support the claim that her coaching was keeping the team in check. Return to triumph. However, the authorities are to blame for every single defeat I've witnessed the Indiana Fever suffer in 2025. As a result, the officials are completely outmatched by the Indiana Fever. That is not true. You go out there, make a statement, and then quickly back off. White's terrible handling of foul trouble and game flow demonstrated that she was out of her depth, according to both fans and commentators. The Fever's dire need for more capable leadership was only highlighted by Caitlin Clark's benching. Additionally, I believe it was possibly the end of the third quarter. At the time, they might have had 51 points. Fever, I mean. They've only scored 30 points overall since the first quarter, I think. The Fever's defeats in the second and fourth quarters demonstrated their inadequacy. Poor play on the court and White's incapacity to lead her team when it counted most were both evident in this collapse. It wasn't a terrific situation for the Fever overall, and we lost that game in the second and fourth innings. And we simply aren't good enough, in my opinion. I don't believe our firepower is sufficient. We don't have adequate defense, in my opinion. We're not large enough, in my opinion. Our strength is insufficient, in my opinion. The offense collapsed without Aaliyah Boston being fed by Caitlin Clark. Boston was left stranded by White's system, demonstrating how poor coaching management revealed the team's flaws at the most inconvenient moment. As you are aware, AB serves as the team's primary facilitator. She is currently in foul trouble. No one is rushing her, isn't that right? Similar to how Caitlin Clark helped Aaliyah Boston on numerous occasions. Even while she was having trouble, she was the leading assister and made a lot of baskets without help. As you can imagine, Boston is fighting Jones, but no one is giving her any easy money. While the defense was unable to recover, the Fever stalled offensively and shot below 35%. Supporters cited White's failure to adapt as the primary cause of this humiliating breakdown. I'm just at a loss for words. After 5 minutes, 15-6 a Fever run. Dream final, 74-53. The last 35 Atlanta Dream wins the first game 80-68. Fever shot less than 35% and stumbled offensively. Defense was unable to compensate. Mitchell Kelsey scored 27 points, 41 for the rest of the team. Indy hosted the second game. Natasha Howard and Aaliyah Boston vanished, and only Kelsey Mitchell appeared. Two of the team's brightest stars under White's direction fell short of expectations, and the Fever were humiliated in the postseason. The game was horrible. The score was 80-68. It wasn't this close, actually. And in this game, two of your major three simply didn't bother to appear. Natasha Howard, 28%, 5 points, 2 of 7. In this game, Aaliyah Boston was terrible. She was awful. She had 4 points deep into the fourth quarter, so don't be deceived by 8 points. There was no chance for the Fever until Boston dominated. The game was a complete bust due to White's failure to establish her star in the paint, which fueled crowd ire and increased calls for change on the sidelines. This team can be defeated, but we won't be able to defeat them if Aaliyah Boston doesn't attend the celebration. If Aaliyah doesn't step up and play big and dominate, we won't be able to defeat them. Additionally, she was punched today. The referees were awful in several of the fouls. Aaliyah and other players were not given many fouls during the fourth quarter. The Fever just went down. The team was upset and beaten as a result of White's lackluster offense, which was characterized by isolation plays and turnovers. Man, it felt like they just fell apart on the fourth. They simply seemed to have given it up. The bridge simply collapsed because they were unable to sustain the water pressure any longer, dude. Stop taking the ball away from your finest player, Stephanie White, particularly when she is the sole facilitator, the sole recipient of buckets, and the sole playmaker. I witnessed a few of pick and rolls between her and AB, at least one of which ended in an easy layup for AB. Well done, Kelsey Mitchell. When I was questioned about employing challenges early in yesterday's video, I stated this. White's response was bewildering and full of justifications. Her incapacity to articulate plan effectively demonstrated her lack of focus and responsibility as head coach. Quite annoying. Even when they succeed, nobody enjoys using their difficulties in the first half. See, it's what it is, and you know that. There is nothing new about this. I believe that we should adapt, use it to our advantage on one end, and strive to be disciplined enough to avoid it on the other. White acknowledged that the Fever slowed down, causing him to miss several plays and hold the ball for too long. But instead of accepting responsibility for this impasse, she abandoned her players to accept responsibility. Yes, we simply become somewhat stagnant, in my opinion. We held the ball a little too long, you know. No, it didn't go side to side. Instead, it went through several acts. We had a little tunnel vision when attempting to get it on the first or second glance, you know. They're also a very strong defensive team. That will not take place. White even pointed to missed shots rather than bad coaching when asked how to improve the offense. Her remarks exposed a leader who was unable to acknowledge the shortcomings of her own system. We are able to play in rhythm and flow as a result. In the second half, it was simply too choppy. How can you assist in trying to cause offense? I am aware that Boston is in foul trouble and that their role as the hub has shifted significantly, but what about their offensive performance in the second half? Yes, we simply become somewhat stagnant, in my opinion. We held the ball a touch too long, Didn't get it to move from side to side or perform several activities. We had a little tunnel vision when attempting to get it on the first or second glance, They're also a very strong defensive team. That will not take place. For parking Aaliyah Boston at the three-point line rather than deploying her inside, White came under fire from critics. Many claimed that this was coaching malpractice throughout the playoffs, that it was an awful abuse of talent. Will you talk